am Zorai Aquino. That's the English pronunciation of my name. Keith has actually been saying the Spanish pronunciation of my name, which is also the correct one. So thank you, Keith. I am the current Student Senate President for Lorain County Community College, and I will let my other two senators introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Pavlak, and I am the Vice President for this academic year.
My name is Saul Aguilar, and I am the Event Coordinator.
Sweet. And we welcome Mec McIntyre from the Genesis House, Riley Hall from the North Center, and Keith Brown, the LCCC Title IX coordinator. So today is an opportunity for them to answer the frequently asked questions about sexual assault and to help us learn what is sexual assault, how is consent defined, and the importance of consent, how to be an ally to survivors, and what resources all three organizations have to offer to assist with these cases. So without further ado, I will let our guest speakers introduce themselves.
Meg, Riley, one of you want to go first? I'll go last.
Go ahead, Riley.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Meg. So my name's Riley Hall. I use she, her pronouns. I am an advocate for the North Center Sexual Assault Services. I'm also the confidential student advocate for Lorain County Community College. So I work with survivors of all ages. I work in 2 different counties, and I am our specific point person for the colleges in Lorain County as well.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My name is Mec McIntyre. I am she, her, hers. I am the manager of community education for the Genesis House. I run all their public, for the most part, I supervise all their public speaking, as well as their Batters Intervention group called MAP, which I'm sure I'll get into at some point. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks, Riley. My name is Keith Brown, and I'm the Director of Human Resources, but I also serve as the college's, or one of the college's, Title IX coordinators. And part of my responsibility is to investigate incidents of sexual misconduct, in addition to trying to stop and prevent the occurrence of those sexual misconduct incidents, in any type of efforts we can engage in as an institution or as a Title IX coordinator working with external organizations like the North Center and Genesis House, in addition to on-campus services like our campus security to provide protection measures to individuals that report those type of incidents to us. And not only protective measures, but also supportive measures as well.
All righty. And thank you for that, Keith. And we'll go ahead and get started with our very first question for the day, which is, what is sexual assault? Is there a one-size-fits-all definition, or are there varying definitions among educational and employment companies?
So I'll start, and Meg, Riley, feel free to chime in. But essentially, what again, sexual assault can really encompass a lot of things. But what I try to boil it down to as a Title IX coordinator is really any type of unwanted sexual contact against a person without their will. And what I also try to do is emphasize consent, especially if it's a sexual assault, it's without the person's consent. And really, a sexual assault can be, really action oriented. You're talking, whether it's coercion, use of force, manipulation, those are all involved in sexual assault. Now, with regard to different employers and colleges and universities, I'll get into that a little later, because sexual harassment or sexual misconduct has been narrowed somewhat because of the previous administration, and in their efforts underway now to rectify that. And I'll get into that later. But Riley, Meg, I'll let you guys chime in as well.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Keith. So I tend to use the term sexual violence, which is like an umbrella term. So think of like LGBTQ plus. So sexual violence, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center defines it as any type of unwanted sexual conduct, including words or actions of a sexual nature that happen against a person's will or without consent. So Keith and I are pretty on the same page with our definitions of that. I also would like to point out that sexual violence can interrupt somebody's feelings of trust, safety, autonomy. A person may use threats, force, manipulation, or coercion in order to commit an act of sexual violence against another person. In terms of different companies, I know that like the legal definition varies from state to state. So different states have different legal definitions. I echo what Keith is saying about the previous administration giving more of a definition of sexual misconduct for educational institutions. I would assume for different places that they're all pretty similar, but they all might have their own individual spin on it.
I want to echo too what Riley just said about the legal definition, because there's a big difference between a legal definition and a social definition. And you know, like which I'll get into in the domestic violence world, but in a sexual assault world, as Riley was saying, it is an umbrella. Sexual violence is an umbrella term, and underneath that umbrella, sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, molestation, sexual rape, there's all these years. And whereas if I'm walking down the street and somebody grabs me and touches my boobs, let's get real here. As much as I would like them to get fully, arrested and cuffed and all that stuff, the likelihood of that is probably pretty low. But within our context of our conversation, we are going to absolutely call that a sexual assault. Well, the courts, maybe not, but those are the social versus legal definition of domestic violence. And it's something that we are constantly tripping over when talking about domestic violence as well as sexual assault.
That's a great point, Meg. Thank you.
Yes, I absolutely agree that there's a difference between the legal and the social terms and definitions, and it can get kind of gray with the misinformation that's out there.
Yep.
And that's why it's important to have events like this where we have professionals talking about it, because that helps to clarify and to wash out all that misinformation that people tend to get riled up with. And I'm like, no, that's not correct, but okay. And Danielle will ask the next question.
So we actually covered a little bit of this with the previous question and the explanations. But what is the difference between sexual violence, sexual harassment, and sexual assault?
Riley, you want to go?
Sure, I can go first. You can, doesn't matter.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, like I said, I tend to use sexual violence as the umbrella term that it is, to sort of fully encompass both sexual harassment and sexual assault. So the term sexual harassment is frequently used in terms of like workplaces or educational institutions. So that can include like unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, like other verbal or physical harassment. Maybe another example might be like talking about sex in a really inappropriate place at work or during school, or sending inappropriate emails to a coworker or something like that. And while sexual assault tends to be more about physical acts, so that would include like rape, penetration, groping, those sorts of things. So I tend to see sexual assault as more of a physical, and sexual harassment is more of a like words and actions, if that makes sense. But there is definitely, I think, a gray area between the two. Yeah, that's all the thoughts I have right now. So Meg or Keith, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, for sexual harassment is such an interesting and huge topic in and of itself. Typically, sexual harassment laws exist in schools and workplaces. And the purpose is because you have the right to go there to a school or workplace and do a job whether it's study or learn or do the job that you are being paid for, in a way that makes it easy. So when sexual harassment comes in, when somebody's unwanted sexual behavior is making that job, studying, doing your job, difficult. And so because of their unwanted sexual behavior, you're afraid to go to school, afraid to go to work, having to do walk-arounds of school because this person, you know, you're going to cross in the hallways, they're going to say something gross, you know, like, so sexual harassment is interesting, especially since it's oftentimes in schools and workplaces will likely mirror flirting behaviors in some cases. And so we spend a lot of time at the Genesis in our relationships curriculum, especially with younger kids, like 7th through 12th graders, talking about those differences between sexual harassment and flirting and kind of walking students through what the difference is. And spoiler alert, the difference is how you feel about it. You know, like that's all it is. Like if one person calls me pretty every day, that is awesome. If a creep calls me pretty every day, I hate you. You know, like, but it's still being called pretty. You know, it all depends on how it lands on me and how I feel about it. And then the fact that it's harassment means that it's continuous. So it is unlikely that I walk down the street every day and the same rando on the street calls me pretty. It could happen once, it could happen twice, I don't know. But it is likely if I go to school or work every day and that happens to me every day. Does that make sense to folks?
Yes.
And I agree with both Meg and Riley. So in terms of us as an institution, and because of the new Title IX regulations, which essentially Title IX says that, you know, no person in the United States shall be excluded from participation, be denied the benefits of, or subjected to discrimination under any federal program or under any college or program activity receiving federal financial assistance. And so from our standpoint, you know, what we go by when we say sexual misconduct or sexual harassment is really three things. You know, it's quid pro quo, which means this for that, where you have, you know, a college employee conditioning a benefit to a student, you know, based on their participation in unwanted sexual activity. So, you know, you have quid pro quo. You also have hostile environment, where this is really this is behavior that's so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it denies the person, you know, their right to engage in whatever activity, you know, we provide as an institute, program or activity that we provide as an institution. And then the third criteria for sexual harassment would be what we call the Clery Act. And our director of security, who's on this WebEx, disseminates every year in October what we call our annual security report. And so in there would be what we call Clery reportable crimes that would constitute sexual harassment or sexual misconduct, including dating violence, domestic violence, stalking, incest, statutory rape, those type of things. So those are the three criteria, again, quid pro quo, hostile environment, and Clery Act defined crimes that we would consider sexual harassment. Now, if to Meg's point, if and fondling, now if it doesn't necessarily reach one of those thresholds, we can still, you know, investigate the incident and you know, and whether it's impose a sanction or whatever the case is, using not necessarily our sexual misconduct policy and procedure, but we could use our code of conduct, because in the code of conduct there's a general term for sexual harassment that would cover anything that our sexual misconduct definition doesn't cover. But again, what I use, you know, sort of what Riley said was sexual violence as the umbrella term for all of those.
And then just one more thing I wanted to add. Thank you, Meg and Keith, for everything that you added. And Meg touched on this a little bit in the beginning question, is that sexual harassment can violate civil laws, like you have the right to go to school or go to work and not be harassed, but sexual harassment often does not violate any criminal, whereas sexual assault can tend to. So that, when working with the criminal justice system, that is one big difference that I have seen between the two.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all of your input. And Saul with the next question.
So my question is, what constitutes consent? What is consent?
Yeah. I can go first if that's okay.
Go ahead.
I love this question. I love to talk about this question. I love to talk about consent. I stick with the FRIES outlook, which is an acronym. So I believe Planned Parenthood is the organization that originally came up with FRIES. And I'll talk through it with you a little bit. So consent has to be freely given. Both all people participating have to give that clear yes. It shouldn't involve any sort of coercion, any sort of pressure, force, manipulation. It should be doing something that you are doing of your own free will, that you don't feel any pressure to do from the other person. Consent is reversible, so you can take back consent at any time. You can change your mind at any point. I know Amber Rose was in an interview a few years ago, and she said something like, "I don't care if we're naked in bed and he has the condom on. If I say I don't want to do it, that's it, and we stop." And so I refer back to that a lot because I think it's a good way to view this reversible. Yeah, like even if you're in the middle of the act. And so moving on to the I in FRIES, it's informed. So when we do like psychological studies, which I know I did a lot of in my time of at LCC, you have to get informed consent by the participants. You have to know what you're agreeing to ahead of time. So an example that comes up with this that I talk through sometimes with clients is if you agree to have sex with a condom and at some point the other person takes the condom off, that's not informed consent. That's not what you consented to, and therefore that is sexual assault. It has to be what you agreed upon and stay that way. So, and then enthusiastic. This should not be like a chore. It should not be one of those things like, oh, I convinced you, or I wore you down, or anything like that. Like, sex should be a fun thing, you know? It should be a fun thing that you're excited to get into bed with that person. And so I really think of consent as like an enthusiastic agreement to do something. And you should be excited, you should be interested. It should be, I keep saying this, but it should be a fun thing. And then lastly, for S, specific. So every individual act requires consent. Just because you are in a relationship with someone and maybe you've had sex with them plenty of times before, it doesn't mean that you give consent every time. It has to be specific to the act, specific to that time, specific to that person. So just because you may have hooked up with people in the past doesn't mean that you're consenting to hook up with this person now today. So that's FRIES. Meg, Ken, or not Ken, sorry, Meg, Keith, anything that you'd like to add?
I guess my only addition, I love FRIES. I've never heard that before, so I love that. When I worked for the Cleveland May Crisis Center years ago, our kind of go-to when talking about consent was, did you feel as safe saying no as you did saying yes? Because I know that many of us have kind of like, we know people or we've had conversations in our own intimate partner life where we are like, I didn't necessarily want to, I did, I wasn't terrified to say no, didn't necessarily want to say yes. Like there's a lot of kind of ambivalence that happens. That kind of gray area that we were talking about happens sometimes in sexual assault. And there's many reasons about it. I think one of them is that when we think about historically, when we think about a sexual assault, we think about something incredibly violent and forced and stranger jumping out of a bush. And, you know, like we have this Lifetime movie nonsense view of what I should be hurt, I should be bruised, I didn't fight, I didn't scream no, I didn't even say no. Like there's a lot of just glorification of what those sexual assaults look like. And that's not what most look like. And so, you know, so I think that people get very confused. And so we need to walk back our visions of what a sexual assault looks like. And it's truly just, obviously there's some of those that happen every day and that's horrifying. More often, you're sexually assaulted by somebody you know, and it's completely ambivalent. It was all in the gray area. You're not necessarily ambivalent that you didn't want to do it, but you're ambivalent about how it went down. And to call it a sexual assault seems so heavy, so we tend to dance around it, if that makes sense to folks.
It does, you know, and to both Meg and Riley's point, you know, and I'll talk about this a little later. Meg, that's what we've seen when we had disseminated a campus climate survey to our students and staff in the fall of 2020, and you know, the students that did report that they were sexually assaulted, they self-reported that they were sexually assaulted, and in terms of why they didn't report the information to college officials was pretty interesting in terms of that gray area. And it was mentioned that, you know, there was some hesitation in terms of, you know, they didn't recognize it as sexual assault or whatever the case is. So but in terms of consent, I mean, I love the FRIES acronym as well. I hadn't heard that before either. The only thing I would add is that, you know, consent can't be given by somebody who's incapacitated or underage or intoxicated. I think fortunately for us, we're a community college and we don't have dorms or residences. So, you know, more often than not, we don't have to worry about the person being incapacitated or being heavily intoxicated. But you know, other community colleges, where actually there's only one, maybe Hocking College, that has a dorm, and obviously Oberlin College has you know, students that live on campus. So fortunately for us, we don't have to worry about those type of incidents. But you know, that's the only thing that I would add.
Yeah, okay. I have some final thoughts, if that's okay, on consent.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go
Keith,
ahead.
thank you so much for bringing that up. That's a good point that I forgot to mention, is that while under the influence of, you know, anything, you're not able to give fully informed consent. You're not in the right state of mind. So thank you so much for adding that. And also, so I run a support group at Oberlin College, and we actually did a session on Sunday where we were talking about a little bit about consent. And I just want to share some of the thoughts that came out of that, because I think they're really good conversation starters. So I know that we tend to think of consent as something that only has to do with sex, right? Like we often only talk about consent when it comes to sexual assault or something of that. But consent matters in lots of different areas of life. And so my belief is that when we're doing prevention work starts with teaching kids what consent is, like from the time that they can talk, you know? Oh, you want to use your sister's coloring pencils? Okay, go ask for her consent. So that when, you know, when you're having the sex talk with your 16-year-old, it's not the first time that they've ever heard the word consent. I think we really need to be building in that language as to what consent is, like from the time that folks are really young. Like one example that I'll share is, so I have a 2-year-old cousin, and I ask him every time. I say, hey, can I give you a hug? Hey, can I have a hug? And I respect his yes, or I respect his no, you know, and I don't pressure or coerce him. I say, okay, you don't want to give me a hug, that's okay. Can I get a high five before I go? Like, I think I just wanted to throw that out there, because I think we often get into this like blinders on vision of like consent only has to do with sex, but it has to do with lots of other things, you know?
Can I build on that really quickly?
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Because I completely agree 100%.
Yes.
And I recently was speaking to somebody who was kind of touching on this. It was confused about what happened to her in this incident because of this whole thing. So she was on a date. She was not from her. She was an Oberlin student. And this happened a year or two ago, but she had agreed to go on a date with somebody who was local to Lorain. And he picked her up and took her somewhere in like the metro parks in Lorain. She doesn't know anything outside of her, you know, the block of the square of Oberlin. She did not consent to go anywhere outside of the block of Oberlin. You know, like she asked to not go to outside of the block of Oberlin, and he drove her anyway. And so when they had sex, she wanted to call it sexual assault. I did too. You know, because now she's in an area that she doesn't know. she's afraid because he's already taken her someplace that she didn't want to go. She's now afraid he's going to leave her, and so she had sex with him. It wasn't violent, it wasn't forceful, it was non-consensual sex because she was already under the non-consent umbrella. Does that make sense? She was taken somewhere that she didn't feel safe, you know? So like I would consider anything that happened after that like a sexual violence. Her, in her mind, was she agreed to have sex with him. That's her words, not mine. Because she was afraid he was going to leave her. You know, like that's not consent. You know, but again, it's that gray area that like it's all, none of it's black and white for the most part. She didn't know this was a year or two ago. She didn't know how to feel about that incident. Sitting with that ambivalence just about, and that's awful. But so I gave her my 2 cents because she asked for it. I'm not walking around saying random things to people for the most part, sometimes. But it really does follow under needing consent in everything you do from the start of the date, the start of your relationship with somebody, period, regardless of your relationship with somebody, an aunt to a nephew, it doesn't matter. Consent matters.
Yes, absolutely. I am
Thank you.
so happy. I am very glad that we touched on this because that is very important. And I will echo your words. I will. I am an aunt to 10 nephews and nieces, and trust me, they need this. We need to start them up young. So thank you so much. And I'm so glad we're recording this because I will send this to them. Okay, watch this. And the next question, we've touched a little bit about it, but does this affect college students? The answer is yes, but if you want to elaborate more on that.
Well, I think from my standpoint, and I think both Riley and Meg have mentioned this, you know, the overwhelming majority of sexual assaults occur by someone the person knows, you know, and again, in the data that I see with regard to anybody who has reported anything to us, I mean, that's what I see. Again, we don't have to, we don't have dorms, so we don't have to worry about, you know, the drugs and alcohol and stuff like that. But again, you know, obviously it impacts college students more so than any other demographic. I remember reading, I can't remember if it was on RAIN, the Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, but there was a statistic with regard to the number of the frequency of female college students being sexually assaulted was highest in the population among, you know, females that get sexually assaulted. I can't remember what the statistic was, and maybe Riley or Meg would know, but it does impact college students pretty frequently.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Keith, I'm glad that you brought up RAIN because I brought statistics from RAIN.
You go.
Yeah, so short answer, yes, sexual assault absolutely impacts college students. I will echo sort of what Keith said. I know at LCC this looks a little bit different. You know, there's not dorms, there's not like after hours parties, there's not drinking or drug use that's going on. People usually come, stay for their classes, get some Starbucks and go home, you know? So I think this looks a little bit different at LCC. But when we're looking at traditional colleges and universities, the first 4 semesters of a student's college career are sort of what's called like a red zone for sexual assault. Especially freshmen women are particularly preyed upon in like the first few months of college classes. So RAIN's statistic is that among undergraduate students, 26% of women and 7% of men experience sexual assault while they're students. And then there is one statistic from RAIN that really strikes me and has for years that I'll share, and it is that so men who are college age, like the 18 to 24 realm, they are almost 80% more likely to experience sexual assault if they are college students. So what that says to me is that colleges and universities can serve as a hotspot for sexual assault. you know, almost 80% more likely. Like, that is a very large number that's always really startled me. And then another thing that I would point out is that college students are way less likely than even like the general population to report to law enforcement. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but sexual assault are one of the least reported crimes. It's estimated like 20 to 30% are reported, and that number is even less folks who are in college. So I know a lot of college students tend to go like the Title IX route, but yes. So I had lots to say on that. Cube or Meg, if you have anything you want to add, go right ahead.
My addition is really, I agree, obviously, agree with the facts. For domestic violence and sexual assault, the average age for a domestic violence victim, including sexual assault, is between 16 and 24 years old. 16 to 24-year-olds are 3 times more likely than any other age group to be victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And as Raleigh said, the least likely to report it. So we have to ask ourselves, why? Like, why is this age group targeted? Anybody want to hop in about why they think that is? Like, what makes that age?
A member, but if I can say something, honestly, I think it, in my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do with up to the age of 24 is because their brains are not fully developed as adults. So they don't really have that capacity to like comprehend. And I feel like predators tend to kind of know that they're still in that young stage to where they're not actually fully adults yet. So that they're less likely to trust people they see as actual adults and disclose that information to them.
Absolutely. These are very, very adult problems that are laid on people who, as you said, Heather, not have fully formed brains, do not have the capacity to handle it, mind you, which is maybe one of the reasons why they don't report. You know, like they just don't understand what they're looking at. You know, there is, even though we have laws, you know, educational bylines, mind you, of, you know, like this stuff needs to be taught in schools. It doesn't mean every school is teaching this. So you can literally have a 22, 21-year-old, 20-year-old college student who's never had a conversation about sexual assault, domestic violence, or consent. So they honestly don't know what just happened to them. And then what that happens is we tend to blame ourselves, especially because that's kind of how domestic violence, sexual assault works. The victim is usually blamed. You shouldn't have been in that person's apartment. You should have been in their dorm room. You shouldn't have been drinking. You shouldn't have been high. You know, like you shouldn't have been wearing that. You shouldn't have been by yourself. You know, like it goes on and on. Rarely do we flip it to why did that person choose to commit that crime? Like rarely do we flip the initial conversation about the victim, about the predator.
I was gonna say also another, responding to your question, maybe another thing is people around that age group aren't really financially independent. Like it's a time of transition where you usually stop relying on your parents and have to usually rely on your own.
Yeah.
So I think it's more likely for a person to just take it, you know, and stay in a house with, say, an abusive partner because there isn't really a way out. There isn't no safety net, you know?
Totally. I saw that was a piece of that story I told about the girl who was driven from Oberlin. She didn't have money for an Uber home. You know, like it was either be by herself or, you know, like in a forest for all she knew, you know, like in the metro parks in the middle of Illyria. And that was it, you know, or have sex with him and get a ride home. So I think that you're right, Saul. I think that's a piece of it too. I think that the problem of why the 16 to 24-year-olds are targeted is humongous, and everybody is right. You know, and for me, what I recognize is one of the things that I see from survivors all the time is they just didn't know. You know, like it was close to their first sexual experience, if not their first sexual experience. one of their first partners, if not their first partner. You know, like when you're old, as I am, you know, like if I get into a new relationship or if I go out on a date tonight, I've been in enough relationships and been on enough dates that I can be like, this guy's weird. Like, because I have an old bank of 30 years of dating and relationships that I've got to compare him to. But if I'm 19 years old and I'm on date 12 of my life, I don't have a bank to compare him to. I just think he's weird, but everyone else is weird. I'm weird. You know, like you don't pick up on those red flags. I'm sorry, Heather, go ahead.
I was going to say another thing, and this is more of like a societal thing, I think, is that a lot of societies sexualize that age range in women. Like they view women as the perfect specimen of their peak beauty between 16 to 24. That's why there's that magic barely legal, you know. But it's so true though. Like they're just waiting for her to turn 18 even if they're just a little bit creepy, you know what I mean? Like you already know they've been watching them since they were 15, 16, 17, just waiting for them to hit that magic 18-year-old spot where they can pounce on them, because now they can't get in trouble, even though they've been lusting after them since they were, 15, 16.
I've been sexualizing them for years like a giant creep. Yeah. Right. All of that is the problem. Like all things.
Oh my God. All of this.
Like way bad and out there, but like,
No, you're right.
No, absolutely.
People don't tend to sexualize, 35-year-old women that have their poop together and
unfortunately
can still look just as good as that 24-year-old, but you don't think about that. People don't put 32-year-old models on the covers of magazines. They put 17-year-old models on runways and magazines and, and show and flaunt them.
And call them the ideal woman.
Yeah.
Not a woman, by the way. Yeah. Yes.
I have to add more points because this is too good for me to not jump in again.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Go ahead. This is the time.
Oh my goodness. I just am loving all of this discussion. Thank you everybody for contributing. So if anyone, I don't know if anyone, I think Sarai, you have been to them. I do these rape culture presentations in women's studies classes here at LCC. And one thing that I always have years for talked about is that the objectification and sexualization of women and girls in all forms of media, advertisements, magazines, TV, movies, pornography, all of it, that contributes to rape culture, that contributes to sexual assault. And I'll share with you all a quote from Jean Kilbourne. She is responsible for Killing Us Softly, which is a really good look at how women and girls are portrayed in media. It's available on YouTube if you're interested. But one quote that I'll always remember from her is that turning a human being into an object is the first step towards justifying committing violence towards that person. I think that is so true. And I think in many ways, society has done that first step of turning people into objects for us. So that's my 2 cents on that. And in terms of college students, just some things that I thought of while we were all talking is college students, like it's very likely that the person who harmed you is somebody that you know, somebody that you go to parties with, somebody that you mess with, a friend of a friend, people that you're going to see on campus. And this has really come up a lot in my work with Oberlin as a more, traditional university as compared to like a community college, is it's a small campus. And so many people are like, I don't want to report to Title IX because then everyone will know that I said that they did that. And then I have to avoid them. And then I have to change what my life looks like. And I think that there's just so many factors that go into when you know that you're going to have to see that person consistently, it becomes, I think, significantly harder to make the decision to report.
Yeah. Or they're part of my friend group and everyone's going to choose them over me.
Yes. Or like, I'm going to ruin the friend group if I say that they assaulted me. Like, everyone's going to be mad at me for talking about it.
Yes, and that actually brings us into the next question, which is why
Yeah.
don't survivors support report? So
Yeah.
either way.
And so again, when we did our survey with students, so one of the questions was, you know, if they were assaulted, and if they were, did they report, yes or no? And so these are some of the responses that we received in terms of, I'll just give you the top four in terms of why the person didn't report. And the first one, the first two that received 33% of the responses were, I didn't think that others would take it seriously. And I didn't think that anything would be done.
Yeah.
And the third and fourth was, I wanted to deal with it on my own. And the fourth one, which, you know, I can understand, but I wish they wouldn't, is I wanted to forget it happened. You know,
Yeah.
I think that that's why, you know, we do these type of collaborations with, you know, Genesis House and North Center Sexual Assault Services, is really to let people know, and particularly survivors know, that it's really them that, you know, we try to empower them to drive the process. You know, and that was one of the good things that come out of the regulations from the Trump administration, was that, you know, they wanted survivors to do, they wanted them to be empowered to really determine what they wanted their outcome to be. And I like that, you know, when I present information to somebody and say, well, what would you like to see happen, or how would you like to move forward? It's really us trying to empower them to really make the decision on how to pick up the pieces and really start to rebuild, you know, their life in terms of what happened, so that they can move forward. Meg, Riley, I welcome your thoughts.
Oh, Meg, do you want to go first? Because I feel like I have a lot to say about this.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think that the point about how they wanted to move on is a problem. You know, like, it is a justice system problem in my assessment, in some of it. You know, like, the justice system is so long. You know, like, it oftentimes doesn't work out in the victim's favor, especially with sexual assault and domestic. So, you know, I have so many clients, you know, whether it's domestic violence, but also sexual assault, who will say, if I report and this goes to the system, I'm now just sitting in the victimization of it. I'm retelling the story. I'm defending my behavior, you know, like, of it. And I'm ashamed of some of my behaviors that I have to act like I'm defending. And they don't want to sit in that victimization. And as I assume some of those answers that Keith are talking about, they wanted to start the healing process. And that's so hard when you're living in it and defending, and then having to go to court and see your offender. And, you know, like, it's just, I 135,000% respect anybody who says, I'm not going to, like, go through the justice system. I'm not going to report it. I get it. You know, like, I hope you do. It's the only way the other person's going to find justice. However, if you don't, I get it. You know, like, so my minute here, it's really just about how we need to hold the justice system accountable to being a part of why people don't report. You know, they are certainly a big one. All right, go ahead, Riley.
Thank you, Meg. Yeah, I mean, agree, absolutely, to all of it. I think that there are so many different reasons. I think that there are so many different reasons. There are millions of them. I will speak to what I have seen in my work. What Meg said. I've met so many clients who are like, I know that if I report this, we'll be waiting to go to trial for a year or two. Or, you know, it's going to keep getting pushed back, or I'm going to have to face them in court, or I'm going to have to testify on the stand. That's terrifying. That's terrifying, to be ripped apart by a defense lawyer, you know? And I've had so many people tell me, like, I feel like I can't move on until this is over, until this trial is wrapped up, until the sentencing is wrapped up. And then the reality is, and I'm not going to sugarcoat things, the vast majority of these cases have no legal outcome whatsoever. I can't tell you how many days of trials I've sat through for the person to be acquitted, or, you know, how many cases don't even go past the first step of the criminal justice process at the prosecutor's office because it's a he said, she said case, and there's no DNA, or there's no physical evidence, or there's so many barriers when it comes to the system, because the system is not built for survivors. It's not trauma informed at all. I've had so many people say to me that reporting and going through the justice system was more traumatizing than the assault itself, and I think that is horrifying, that the system that we're doing to try to help people get justice is more traumatizing to them in some cases than the reason that they're here. So that's my preface, and then I'll go into the list of reasons that I usually give during my presentations. So one big basic reason that I see is misinformation and lack of access. So I think this can mean a lot of different things. Most often people think that to get, a forensic medical exam, what's frequently called a rape kit, you have to go to the emergency room. That's not true in a lot of places. It's not true in Lorain County. The Nord Center is the only provider of rape kits in Lorain or Huron County of Ohio. And so I think that is one barrier, that people go to the hospital and then they get to the hospital and they're told, oh, we don't do that here. And it's like, well, I already drove here and I already got here, and now I don't feel like doing that, Going through the exam is incredibly traumatic, I think. It's very invasive. Your body is a crime scene. I think we talked about this a little bit before, but there are so many instances where people don't realize that what happened to them was sexual assault until weeks, months, years later, I can't tell you how common that is when maybe a friend of yours is talking about their experience and you think, oh, wow, that happened to me a few years ago and I didn't put that label on it. Maybe I should be putting that label on it. Maybe that wasn't okay. The fear that the criminal justice system or medical staff may re-traumatize them. I think that that's valid, having somebody pick and prod and poke at all of your body parts and ask you all of these questions and try to get you to remember every single detail when all that you want to do is forget. I think that that's valid. And so much of sexual assault, sexual violence is wrapped up in shame, the feeling of, I deserved that, I don't deserve better than that, that's what I'm worthy of, those sorts of the embarrassment, the self-blame, the guilt, the shame, the fear that you won't be believed. I mean, our society is not exactly kind to survivors, their characters ripped apart. I won't get any specific examples because I could go down a rabbit hole there. But the fear that the assault's going to be seen as their fault, that people are going to be like, well, you were out at night by yourself in that bad side of town. What did you think was going to happen? You were in that hotel room with them. What did you think was going to happen? And then these are some things that come up, I'd say a little bit less frequently, but I think are still real, valid, and deserve to be discussed. Not wanting the perpetrator to get into trouble. I talked about that a little bit with the college, but 80% of sexual assaults are somebody that you know, a family member, a friend, somebody that you work with. It can really throw your life upside down to go into the reporting process. It becomes almost like a full-time job in some ways to stay on top of the reporting process. The fear that if you speak out, the person will retaliate against you. I mean, and then not seeing it as important or serious enough to report. I've heard that a lot. So that's my list of reasons.
And I'll add one, and I think Riley touched on this. So, you do encounter those situations where, someone obviously, and again, in roughly 80%, they know they're, the person that assaulted them. And, a lot of times they don't want to get that person in trouble, to Riley's point. And so one of the things that we offer is what we call informal resolution. So a person won't have to go through, a Title IX investigation, or again, we can help them report the information to Elyria Police if they want. We have an excellent working relationship with our campus security, and they have excellent relationships with various law enforcement organizations throughout Lorain County. So, but if they don't want to report it to Elyria Police and they don't want to make a formal report to me as Title IX coordinator, the other option would be for them to engage in what we call restorative justice. And restorative justice is really just our way to try to informally resolve the incident among the two. And so what we would do is we would engage in a dialogue with those two. First and foremost, though, the perpetrator would have to accept responsibility. If he or she didn't, then we wouldn't be able to do restorative justice. We wouldn't be able to engage in that process, and it would go through again if the complaint, what we call the complainant or survivor, wanted to do, engage in a formal process, then they would submit that information. However, if both parties agreed to engage in informal resolution and the respondent accepted full responsibility for his or her actions, then we can engage in informal resolution where we try to identify the harms that were caused to the complainant. We would try to repair those harms and allow the complainant to tell us what that reparation would look like. And then the third component to that is we try to rebuild the relationship between the two. Again, to Riley's point, a lot of times it's, I don't want to get this person in trouble. I want to know two things: why this person did it, and what he or she's going to do, to prevent something like that from happening in the future. So, it could be whether just an apology, a letter of an apology. It can be pretty much anything that the complainant, wants that reparation to look like. And so that's a process that we can engage in. We've engaged in that one time so far. But then again, last year was an anomaly with COVID. And so, as we see students returning and as we see more of these sexual misconduct incidents that are reported to us, that is a process that we would let the parties know in the beginning that that's what they can engage in, so that they can move on, to Meg's point, so that they can move on and start to, rebuild their life.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's about to be one, so, and I want to make sure that we cover two of the two last questions that we have. So we're going to skip questions 7 through 9 because we have covered them in the conversation. And we really want to make sure that we cover the next two. So that leads me to the next question, which is, how do we become an ally for survivors?
Yeah. I can go first. I just had some closing thoughts to what we were just talking about. I really wanted to echo what Mec was saying about supporting people, whether they report or not. I just want to make that clear. I am a confidential resource on campus. Students can come to me whether they want to report or not, and I don't have to report anything to the college or to the Title IX office. So I am here to support survivors regardless of whether they report or not, and I understand why people may not want to. So I just want to put that out there, let y'all know I'm a safe space for folks who don't want to report. How do we be a good ally? I think this is a great question. I'm so happy you asked. My number one answer is believe survivors.
Yep.
Believe survivors. Believe them without question. Believe them without doubt. Believe them when they're in your own life, in your own community, and believe them when it's on the front page of the news. Just believe them. What do you stand to lose by believing them? I often think to myself, like, I automatically believe folks because if, God forbid, we find out that they lied, I would rather believe a lie than try to deny somebody their truth, So I think sexual violence thrives when it's not taken seriously and when people don't check others. So, in your friend groups, in your family, when people are victim blaming, when people are making rape jokes, call them out. A simple, well-placed, hey dude, that's not cool, can do wonders. You know what I mean? A simple, hey, I don't appreciate that talk. Here's why. Respecting people's boundaries, like I talked about before, the consent piece. Respect people's consent in your life. If your friends say they don't want to drink tonight, don't pressure them to drink tonight. I think it can play out in a lot of different ways. Respecting people's boundaries, their consent, particularly with children. Make it known that you're an ally to this community. Like, in the same way that folks make it known for like the LGBTQ plus community and have banners on their Facebook and have it in their Instagram bio and stuff like that. You can be an ally for folks who are survivors of sexual violence and domestic violence too. So, Meg, Keith, take it away.
I mean, you stole all my answers. I echo all of them. So obviously, absolutely, when you are hearing somebody who has been sexually assaulted, become a shame-free zone. You know, completely support all things that they say. And when you hear about sexual assaults, focus on the person who's committing crimes. Let that be the focus of the conversation. Let that be the focus of your judgment. And again, I will echo Riley in, you need to call out microaggressions. We are not going to see people sexually assault somebody in front of us. What we will see is glimpses of their belief system, which is a rape joke, you know, which is misogyny. We see that in people's outward behavior. They do the other stuff, the big stuff, the abuse and the rape stuff. And obviously I'm talking about mostly as males, as identified males as abusers in this case, which is not always, mind you. But domestic violence and sexual assault, the people that perpetrate these crimes do it because of it's a belief system. It's in them. They believe they have the right. We will see that belief system played out in public. Listen to them. You know, when they say sexist, misogynistic, racist things, call out every single one of them. That is somebody showing you who they are. And then you got to believe them about who they are. You know, so whenever, as Riley said, you know, like the, hey man, that's not cool, or so you're making rape jokes. Why is rape funny? You know, like call it all out. Does it make me popular? No, but I have a lot of friends because they know that they will always be able to come to me, and I will always see them in any bar, in any parking lot, in any home, at any party, at any time. You know, like, and so I call it all out, because I've taken this on as my job for, you know, 27 years now, right? Guys, all guys love me. It does not, unfortunately. However, I call out women too, you know, like, because that you're watching somebody's belief system on display, and that's not okay. Call it out. You know, like, that's how you let people know that you're a safe person. That's also how you let predators know that their behavior is unacceptable.
Yeah, and I don't really have much to add other than to, you know, obviously believe them, and really let them know that it wasn't their fault that they were assaulted, and let them know that they're not alone and that you're there to support them, and let them know that there are resources available, whether it's again on campus, you know, through our office, Title IX, we have our confidential student advocate, Riley. You know, we have excellent working relationships with Genesis House, so that there are resources that are available. That you can provide, because chances are, if it's not you, it's probably going to be somebody that you know. Again, what we saw, not in this past year's climate survey, but 2 years ago, while the individuals that were assaulted didn't report it to us, the person that they did report the assault to was a friend or a trusted friend. So, you know, chances are, again, you probably know somebody who's been assaulted. And again, having that information about what resources are available on campus or off campus can really help.
Yeah. Of course, I have some more thoughts. I hope no one minds. I want to branch off of what Meg was saying about using language that holds people accountable. This was something that came up in our support group over the weekend that I really want to highlight. The difference between active voice and passive voice. So active voice is Alex raped Cameron. Passive voice is Alex was raped, or Cameron was raped, sorry. What we're doing there is we're making this, we're shifting like the political effect, and we're changing the narrative of the story. So if we say Alex raped Cameron, that tells you who the perpetrator is. Alex is number one in the sentence. The focus is on Alex and the act that Alex committed that was wrong. When we say Cameron's a sexual assault survivor or Cameron was assaulted, we are making it all about Cameron. We are totally letting Alex off the hook. We're not thinking about Alex. We're thinking about Cameron. We're asking questions about Cameron. What were you wearing? Had you been drinking? We're asking those questions, and we're no longer focusing on Alex, the perpetrator. We've shifted it to be like, well, this is on you and we're talking about you. And while, you know, I come from a client-centered point of view, survivors are most important to me, yada, yada. But when we're talking about it, we need to include the perpetrator because it is them who did this, you know? So that's one thing that's one rant. Yeah. And then branching off of what Keith said, when folks disclose to you, make it a shame-free zone, like Meg said, a shame-free, judgment-free, pressure-free zone. Don't press them for details. Don't ask them lots of questions. Say, I believe you. I support you. I'm here for you. I'll do whatever I can that will be helpful to you. I'm glad you felt like you could share this with me. It's not your fault. You're not alone. I'm so sorry that happened. That shouldn't have happened. Like, there are so many supportive phrases that folks can say. And I will say, you know, when I first got into this work, I thought that I believe you, it's not your fault, you're not alone. I thought of them as pretty cliche. I'm not gonna lie. I just want to be honest. I thought of them as like, that's not gonna help anybody. They probably hear that all the time. That's so cliche, it's not gonna help anyone. And after working in this field full time for 2 years, I can tell you it does. I have seen people burst into tears when I said, I believe you, because it was the first time I ever heard it, you know? So don't downplay, even though they're simple, don't downplay how helpful they can be to folks and how powerful the words that you use about sexual violence really are. Okay, I've said all I needed to say about that.
I love this. I love this. And yeah, I want to piggyback off of what you said, Riley, because you really don't think that those small words make an impact at all. And the more we normalize that, the more we normalize that we believe them and we can provide that no shame environment, the more it's going to be surprising and unexpected when they're not believed. So that is kind of like turning the reverse psychology. That just reminds me of myself growing up. My mom she always took me seriously. She's always believed every word I've said, which has been a good and a bad thing. More good, but you know, we're kids lie, whatever. But that helped me grow up in an environment where I had someone that I trusted that believed in me. And when I came out of that environment where people would look at me and they're like doubting what I'm saying, I'm like, why are you doubting me? Why, what is your reasoning for not believing what I just said or for not taking this seriously? Like, I need explanation or else I'm going to doubt you. Or else I'm going to turn the tables on you. And that's where we dig into what Meg was talking about, what their beliefs are. They're on display when that happens. And I'm just all for it and need to take it to everybody else. I love it. So that leads us to our last question, which is, how can LCCC, Genesis House, and Nord Center help? What are your resources? Everything.
Riley, Meg, I'll let you guys go first. I can close out.
Okay. So if you go to our website, www.genesishouseShelter.org, has our hotline. Is free and confidential, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a chat line that runs through our website as well. It's a 24-hour chat line, runs all the same hours, so all the time as the call-in hotline. We are available. We're a shelter, so we're available at all times for folks. We've also started a podcast, which is very exciting. So it's me and my executive director. It's called Love Shouldn't Hurt. It can be found on our website as well. And we're only like intro and one episode in, but the point of it is so folks can get this kind of, the reality of it is, and Riley, you know this, like, and Keith as well, you know, like when we're kind of spreading this information about healthy relationships, sexual assault, domestic violence, we're missing the masses, you know, like we're missing 90% of the population who's not in school. Because that's really where we're most spending our time. So there's a whole generations and populations of folks who will never hear this information. So that's where our hotline kind of comes in. Our podcast. So the goal of it is to spread that information to people who can hear whatever they can in a confidential location. It's going to be kind of just really educational. So the first episode is foundation laying. And so it's just so folks can hear definitions of domestic violence and types of abuse. We're recording tomorrow, and it's just going to be gaslighting is the entire episode. So we're trying to widen all of our community education as well. So if you have any questions, to say that the hotline is for everyone. It's not just for folks who are looking to come into shelter. It is for anybody who is a victim of domestic violence or has been in an abusive relationship and needs some support that night, or as a friend who's that's abusive and needs some support. For any sort of information, it's for everyone at any time. So feel free to spread that, use it, whatever you need to do. That's on me.
Okay, so you now have your biggest podcast fan. Thank you for telling me that.
Right on.
Listening tonight.
Where is your podcast available from?
So it's on our website. So it's on a SoundCloud account. But if you go through our website, at the top of our website, it'll have at the very end like blog and podcast. Click on podcast, and that's where you can listen to it.
And I did put Genesis House as well as the Nord Center's websites in the chat. If you want to just click on that.
Okay, so in terms of the Nord Center, how can the Nord Center help? So many ways. So we also have a 24/7, 365 hotline. I will share that in the chat now. So this is, oh wait, that's weird. It will only let me send it to one person at a time.
I know, yeah. I tried to send the links as well, but I think it's the one of the host settings.
Okay,
that's weird.
If you don't mind sharing it.
Yeah, I'll share it.
Thank you. So yeah, we also have a 24/7, 365 hotline. Somebody will always answer that. Christmas, Easter, holidays, weekends, after hours, doesn't matter. Somebody's always going to be there. That's for any sort of support. So branching off of what Meg was saying, like you do not have to have just experienced sexual assault to call our hotline. You don't need to want a forensic medical exam to call our hotline. You can call if it happened 50 years ago. You can call if something happened to your friend and you want to support them. You can call if you think maybe something happened to you, but you're not sure and you just want to talk about it with somebody. I think we can offer a wide range of services for folks. So all of the services that we provide are totally free, totally confidential. So nobody's ever going to know that you came here unless you give us the okay, to talk to the police on your behalf or something like that. So the Nord Center is the Rape Crisis Center and also the Children's Advocacy Center for both Lorain and Huron County. So like the Lorain area, the Norwalk area, we take care of both of those places. So what that looks like is providing exams and forensic interviews for children, for adults, for folks of all ages. We have a full staff of advocates, not just me, who work with all different types of survivors. We have a pretty diverse staff. We all have sort of like our own special projects that we work on and special populations that we work with. So mine is the college population. I'm the confidential student advocate, as I stressed before. Folks who want to talk with me are not at all required to make a report. We can provide legal advocacy, so going to court with you, providing support through that, telling you what court's going to be like. Prepping you for court, maybe meeting with the prosecutor with you, case coordination, staying in touch with the police, staying in touch with children's services if it's a child case. What's going on with your case? What have they done? What are the updates? We also do ongoing psychoeducation appointments. So I'm not a therapist. I do not have a license to do that, but I have a lot of resources when it comes to sexual violence and healing and self-care and coping. And there's a lot of things that we can work on in that space. And then support for people who are not direct survivors, for co-survivors. I had a lovely all over the weekend with a guy whose girlfriend is a survivor, and he wanted to provide support and have resources to be there for her. So long answer, but lots of different things.
Yeah, thanks, Riley. Thanks, Meg. And really to bring this all home, from a Title IX perspective, what we try to do is really connect people to those resources, whether it's the North Center Sexual Assault Services or Genesis House, or working back with our campus security office to provide on-campus escorts or parking accommodations, or again, even, notifying law enforcement. Those are the little things that we do. But in addition to that, we also have what we call our Advocacy and Resource Center. We collaborate with them as well, and that's sort of an umbrella organization or office that we have on campus that helps everything from can contact legal advocacy. They can work back with our Commodore cupboard in terms of access to food. We have a care center for individuals that are having issues with substance abuse, because what we know is that if somebody's coming to us with one issue, chances are they probably have some issues in some other areas. And so what we try to do is just really connect them to those resources. Again, whether it's me as Title IX coordinator, working back with campus security, or Riley or Meg, that's essentially what we try to do, is really connect them to those resources. And those are just some of the resources that we have on our campus. I did provide a link to some of the resources that we have in the chat feature if you'd like to take a look at some of the things that we can do in terms of if somebody were to report information to us, how we can help them, in terms of whether they want to report it, whether they want to pursue informal resolution, or if they want to talk to somebody in confidence like Riley, or if they need shelter outside of here, we can work back with Meg. But those are just some of the things that we can do.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all very, very, very much for doing this with us. We do have a couple of just student senate announcements for some events that we have coming up. That you're all invited to attend, by the way. It's open to all LCC students, faculty, staff, and you guys have done several events with us, so you guys can come too. So I'll leave it off to Danielle and Saul for that, and I'm gonna chime in a bit.
So first of all, we have something called a Day at the Movies this upcoming weekend, April 17th. We're hosting a movie showing at Atlas Cinema, and it is completely free for students, and you can bring a +1. If you sign up, the first 60 people that sign up will get free popcorn and soda. And the movie that we're going to be watching is called A Boy Called Poe, which is the story about this boy who has autism and deals with bullying in his school and his everyday life. It's a very good story. And there is an event page on Facebook, which I will send to Keith so that he can share it to everyone. And please, if you know someone who is interested in participating, just send them the link. And again, remember, it's completely free.
Yes, and I wanted to chime in and say that the reason why we're doing this one is because April is also Autism Awareness Month.
Oh, yes.
Last month, we did 2 Day at the Movies for Women's History Month, and we did Hidden Figures and Queen of Cutway. And both two amazing, empowering movies. And whoever has yet to watch them, please do. And so we had fun with those two, so we're like, oh, well, let's just keep it going. Let's just do another one. And then Danielle, go ahead.
And also, you follow the Facebook link. You can actually look at the Student Senate whole page. We have another event listed that's coming up this coming Friday at 3 p.m., where we are having a talk with members of the Learning Differences Club so that we can see the student perspective through their eyes on campus and what it's like to be a college student with a learning difference.
Yes, and we just met with them last week, and they are beautiful people. They're very, very outspoken, and I'm very excited to do this event with them.
Yeah, really looking forward to that.
We also have the next 2 workshops in our financial literacy workshop series, because April is also Financial Literacy Awareness Month. So we're trying our best to keep up with all of these awareness months. And so next Monday is our Scholarships 101 with the staff and faculty of our Student Financial Aid Office, and that is around this same time frame, which is 12 to 1:30. And then the following Monday, which is April 26th, we'll do the Student Loans 101, where we can learn the ins and outs of student loans, why to do them, why not to do them, and how to keep track of them, so you don't get screwed. And if you, it's kind of late in the game, but if you attend all 4 sessions, which is not the case anymore, but for students who have been attending so far, if you attend the next 2, you get you'll have a chance to win a $250 gift card to the campus bookstore that is also redeemable for tuition. So spread the word. And then there's today the sexual assault awareness Q&A that we just completed, and the links for that are in the chat, and I'll be doing a follow-up email with the respective flyers and links on where to find everything. You can like us on Facebook to keep up to date with what's going on, and with that, just get the word out. Help us get the word out as much as we can. And you're all invited to all of our stuff as well. You never know what you might get. Hint, hint. So with that, thank you all for joining us today, and remember to follow us on social media, keep up to date, and I did send my email in the beginning, but I'll send it again. So everyone who's attended today, you can send me your contact information so you can get your little gift for attending today. And I want to thank our guest speakers, Meg, Riley, and Keith, for doing this event with us, and I thank the students that joined today.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure hosting this event and answering your questions. We hope that you have a lot of positive takeaways, and that we have helped you become more aware and understanding of what sexual assault is and how to be an ally, and where to find resources. So we encourage you to make use of this important information shared today, and remember to sign up for the following events. And thank you for coming. And once again, I am Zoraya Kino, the Student Senate president for this year, and I'll let everybody else reintroduce themselves as we close.
Go ahead, Danielle.
And I'm Danielle Pavlak, the vice president.
And I'm Saul Aguilar, the event coordinator.
And now our guest speakers.
Well, I'm Riley Hall, a confidential student advocate from the Nord Center. Thank you everyone for coming today. This was really fun. I'm really happy with all the discussion we got to have. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone. I'm Meg McIntyre. Talk to you soon.
And again, this is Keith Brown, Lorain County Community College Director of Human Resources and Title IX Coordinator. Meg and Riley will be back next week, Wednesday and Thursday. That information is on the link that you guys saw when you register for this session. So, and I'll be back next Monday. So, and then we have a session tomorrow on survivors and prison rape. So feel free to register.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Keith, if you want to chime in and put in the RSVP link for those.
Yes, 1 moment.
So I can also include it in the follow-up email.
Okay, 1 moment.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the presentation tomorrow. My coworker, Marissa Jankura, our PREA advocate, is going to be doing it. Marissa has worked with folks who are incarcerated for about 2 or 3 years now. So I've seen her do this presentation before. It's really informative. So if you can join, I highly, highly recommend it.
Okay, and I just included it in the chat. So if you guys want to access that, feel free to do so.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we almost finished on time. Thank you. Bye. Have a great
Thanks, everybody.
Monday.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.